Yes, thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you for showing an interest in the Rooted in Jesus trip and the organization as a whole. As many of you will know, Rooted in Jesus is a UK-based organization that sends teams out to many different many different countries in Africa. It started in partnership with the Church of Tanzania, and there was someone there who was wondering how they could best fulfill the Great Commission and to make disciples. And they realized that they had very few resources, they had very few courses, they had very few trained people. And in conversation with one or two folk from the UK, they started Rooted in Jesus, and it's essentially, in UK Western lingo, it's a series of small group Bible studies that anyone and everyone can take and use and share with others. And I'll say some more about that in a few moments. But the team that we went out with, there were 3 of us from the UK going to South Sudan. There's a picture of Mike at the top waving at us. He was our team leader. He's very experienced and has done about 15, 16 trips or something to different African countries, 5 to South Sudan, so he was the real veteran of the group. Andrew, AJ, on the bottom left, it was his first trip. But he's been a friend of Mike's for a long time and has prayed for them for many years on their trips, and then myself on the right. And we'll meet Luke, who is from South Sudan, later in one of the pictures. So we set off from Heathrow, and we flew. We had to wear masks on the airplane. We nearly didn't get on because one of us couldn't find... nearly couldn't get on. That might be a bit of an exaggeration. But we had to make sure we were vaccinated or had PCR tests and things like that. And they were quite strict about those sorts of things as we flew off. But we did make it to Ethiopia first. This is Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. Very busy city. And then from there we flew. And there's a little video of us landing in Juba, which is the capital. And hopefully it's not too loud. And we'll watch us landing while I say a few more things about South Sudan. There you go, for those who have interests in planes. So this is the capital city of Juba. You can see it's very sparse. There is very limited infrastructure in the whole country. It's a country that has been in the middle of civil war for a long time, with what is now known as Sudan and the capital there, Khartoum. And lots of issues and very little stability, and so opportunities to build infrastructure, to learn and to grow as people has been very limited. There's still ongoing tensions, and I think much of it kind of caught up in politics and in religion, between particularly Islamic background folk and Christians. But yeah, it's a really tough place, and lots of traumatized adults. It's got the youngest population in the world. Half of their population is under the age of 18. I think because so many of the older folk did not survive famine and war and those sorts of things. So yeah, most people are farmers. You can see the housing, a lot of it is just kind of propped up tin bits and bobs and reeds and mud housing. We'll see some more of that later. There's a lot of dependence on NGOs, and that was us landing in Juba. And not much education, but we did, land in Juba. We were met there by a driver, and things, when they were well organized by the local bishops and coordinators, everything went really smoothly. But when it wasn't well organized, we were in a bit of a stuck, because a lot of things in South Sudan, it seems, doesn't really have the systems in place. It's very much kind of who you know, and if you've spoken to the right person at the right time, and if they've agreed to do something and they actually carry it through, then that's great. But if not, then you're a bit stuck. So we go, Rooted in Jesus, send teams out there, and the purpose of our trip is, and we'll see a few photos of our time in Juba, including the guest house and the cathedral as we speak. The team goes out and puts on 3 or 4 day conferences. This is a bedroom in the guest house. And we teach them from the scriptures, and we give them books for these Bible studies. And they're supposed to recruit about 100 or 150 folk from the diocese who can read, even if it's only just about. And they're given these resources to go out back into their homes and their communities and to start Bible studies and to help people to grow as Christians by doing memory verses, using lots of illustrations, lots and lots of visuals, and breaking things down so it's really easy for folk to share Bible studies and share learning together as Christians. This is the university, the Theological College campus. This gentleman here on the left is the Vice Chancellor. He's a retired minister from the UK who, in his retirement, somehow, he did tell us the story, but it's quite long and convoluted. But he ended up, he spends about half his time in South Sudan each year teaching people, teaching pastors and training people for the ministry. So we had a day or two in Juba before we headed off towards the diocese we were doing the training, and he showed us around a little bit, including we got to see one of the main tributaries to the Nile. So it's technically called the White Nile, but it's as big as the Nile, and it was massive, but very, very beautiful. And it was quite nice to be able to wander around Juba a little bit and acclimatize to the very hot weather. 35 degrees regularly, very, very little cloud cover, just hot, hot, hot. He's a very tall man, and he thought that the best way to stay safe was to walk at pace with determination and a purpose. And the three of us, having just landed, we really struggled to keep up with him, but we did just about manage. We got to a bridge where you can cross the Nile, and for the most part, our time there was pretty safe. But we, at the end of this bridge, someone who seemed a bit like he had a few screws loose, perhaps, came up to us and actually manhandled Peter in the front. The problem was that he'd seen this guy, one of us, taking photos of the bridge, and he thought that we were a security risk. So we were surrounded by 6 or 7 men, 1 or 2 of them in police and military uniform, and demanding our phones and asking us who we were. We did manage to get away, and we just hightailed it back to the guest house, slightly worried. But that was the most kind of personally worried moment for us. But it was fascinating walking through Juba. Here on the right, there's no rubbish bins anywhere. People just throw their trash on the ground, and then somehow or another it gets added into massive piles, and this is just it being burnt on the right-hand side. So that's kind of gives you a flavor of Juba and South Sudan. This is some of the money. $100 US note turned into 60,000 South Sudanese pounds, and there's a whole pile of money that used to be one single note. So that was interesting. This was some of the food we ate at the guest house: fish and rice and beans. Lots of rice, lots of beans. So yeah, that gives you a flavor of South Sudan, I hope. A lot of the challenges with going to South Sudan was practicalities. There's no easy way to send money into the country, and organizing, booking of flights and things, therefore was very, very difficult. We eventually did manage to book flights through the Archbishop, and this is us flying towards the northwest of South Sudan. So we were heading to 3 dioceses on the northwestern end of South Sudan, about 2 hours drive from the border with Sudan, to a diocese called Awil Town, to Nyamlel, and to Wanjok. And so we duly flew to Awil Town, which is a reasonably sized town in the northwest region. When we landed, we got into a car and we were confronted with Cows. Lots and lots and lots of cows being herded, and the people herding them will just look at you and expect you to honk your horn and to maneuver your way through the cows and hope that the cows did not get hurt and hope that we did not get hurt. We joked about whoever was on the side of the seats because some of these cows had massive horns. Well, those were the ones who were the unlucky ones sat on the side because you might get speared by a cow. This is a real town. We had one more set of troubles here. Landing in South Sudan, we had to register with the police as well as getting visas. We arrived on the weekend in Juba, and we couldn't make it to a police station while it was open. And so we thought, well, we'll wait till we get to a real town. The police in Awil were not happy with that, and they threatened to fine us. But thankfully, the bishop was there and pleaded on our behalf, and we managed to register without any great problems. From there, it was about a 2-hour drive through long, 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 straight, dusty roads, much like this picture, and it would just go on for miles. And we got to Nyamlel, where we were welcomed. If you see into the distance, I didn't take a video. I wish I did. I didn't know how acceptable it would be to video things and not just to enjoy it in person. But it turned out that lots of the locals who did have phones were also recording the event, so I wish I'd done. But they started a Sunday school in this young diocese at the beginning of the year, and the Sunday school teachers and the children were there welcoming us with song, and we received a very, very warm welcome at this first diocese that we were at. And this is the church building with about 100, 120 folk in there, and our team at the front as we're being welcomed and introduced. People, many of them walked half a day and a half even, to get to the conference. This was a 4-day conference where we'd do talks and workshops and different sorts of ministry. There'd be lots of worship as well. Many of them, had to walk a long way. Some would carry their bits and bobs with them, sleep on the side of the road at night, and then carry on traveling the next morning. This building was built by Samaritan's Purse, as many, many of their church buildings are in this area. So a lot of them looked exactly the same, some slightly longer, some slightly shorter, but they largely looked like that. And it's up to individual churches to find funding to install windows, to build walls and things like that. So we'll see a church later that had no walls. We met with local politicians, some of whom are Christians, the commissioner and the local paramount chief. When British missionaries first went there, it was under this big tree that they appointed paramount chiefs and chiefs to lots of different local areas, and so it still holds kind of a bit of historical memory in the local politics to come and meet and to gather under this tree, which is what we did, and there's people fishing nearby, and you can see there's some greenery, but it's quite dusty, and we spent a lot of time outdoors. Here is us doing a teaching session outdoors in the late afternoon. So Luke there in the middle is one of our team giving a talk, and there's a translator, and then a whole bunch of clergy, some of the Mothers Union, many youth, some Sunday school leaders, some youth leaders were there learning from us. And it was really important, I think, to highlight that when we went, there was a real sense of gathered unity in the church, that we weren't there as kind of bringing something new or bringing something that they didn't have, in a sense. Many of these organizations from overseas, there's lots that they do contribute, which is unavailable there. But I think there was a sense for us that we're just coming and we're opening up the scriptures that you already have in your hands. We're teaching you the same things that your pastors are teaching. We're teaching you the same word that your bishops have been teaching you. But we're expounding it and sharing our experience and putting some books in your hands. And so we did a 4-day conference here in Nyamlel, and then a 3-day follow-up conference in Awil town, and also a 3-day follow-up in Wanjok Diocese. Because the way Rooted in Jesus works is we go 2 consecutive years, if we're able to, 1 year to introduce the resource, and then a second time to follow up and to build upon the first year and to answer questions and to help some more. We stopped for lots of tea, no fresh milk, but milk powder and whatever tea bags were available, and bread often, and we'd sit in the shade and drink tea 3 or 4 times a day. So I think lots of British people would feel very at home there in lots of ways. This was AJ doing some teaching with a translator. Lots and lots of visuals and illustrations in our talks. Lots of interaction with the congregation. This morning, I think Kerry was talking about shouting during songs and shouting hallelujah. That was a very, very, very common occurrence throughout our teaching. Part of Rooted in Jesus, what they do is, because not everyone can read, or if they can read, their literacy is very limited, we did lots of memory verses. So here's a video of my group doing, that I was working with, learning a memory verse in their local language, Dinka. I think. Is it going to go? Start again one more time. They were just about getting it. I think that one was I am the gate, with Jesus teaching about sheep and shepherds and gates. But yeah, very important for them where they're going back to. As I say, literacy levels were very, very low. The first half of our time there, I was, during my talks, encouraging someone to read from passages in the Bible. It would often take 5 or 6 minutes to read 2 verses, because they would just really struggle to read even in their own language, let alone in English. But they were very good verbally, so ended up just doing verbal translations of the Bible on the hoof with translators rather than reading the Bible. But that illustrates some of the challenges, that these are the more educated ones who came to the conference, and the hope would be that of the 100, 120 or so there, that there'd be 30 or 40 groups of 10 or 12 folk starting up over the next year. This, I think, next video is some of our worship, sung worship, as we gathered together. Oh no, this is an illustration of a balloon and being filled with the Spirit. And yeah, for many of them, they won't have seen many balloons in the past. And so there was quite a lot of fun had in hitting it about. So, there was quite a full schedule, lots and lots of teaching, lots of informal conversations, lots of workshops and Bible studies, sometimes sending them out to do them, sometimes demonstrating them ourselves over the 4 days at this first diocese. But where we had gaps, we tried to spend time with some of the children, and especially here where there was a newly established Sunday school. This is the head Sunday school teacher in the middle, and you probably can't quite see it, but Mike is holding a gift from the Sunday school to us in his hand. It's a chicken, a live one. That's the sort of gift that they gave to one another. And I'm not quite sure exactly what happened to that. Well, I do know exactly what happened, but I don't know how it happened or when it happened. But it did end up in one of our meals the next couple of days. There were lots and lots of children around. A really challenging environment for the children. They were very surprised when we talked about our schooling system and how year after year, even if you don't pass any exams, you get to go up to the next year group. You don't have to pay school fees. Not directly anyway, not a point of use. And so if you're 12 years old, you're in year 7. That's just what happens in this country. Not so over there. School fees are quite significant outlay for families. Many of the families cannot afford to send their children to school or cannot send them to school consistently, depending on their crops that year and whether they've managed to make enough or not. There's very, very little savings, if any, for many of them. And so there were lots of children who were around and about not doing very much. And this was us playing some very, very simple games with them. But they're not a culture where children are played with.
Come. I'm going to see if I can take another child. Sadly.
I'll take another child. Let me explain that. There's a girl in there who is currently playing, and I think she's wearing that light yellow dress on the third from the left. And she was holding her younger sibling, as many of them do, because their parents are busy working, getting food, getting water, and the children are left to wander around. If you're over 6 years old or 5 years old, there's a pretty good chance you might have a younger sibling on your hip, especially if you're a girl. And she was watching on, unable to join in and play. So I helped take the little baby so that she could join in and play. And I think, oh yeah, there you go. There's a picture of me holding her little sister. And you can see that the number of children has grown. And over the course of about half an hour, 45 minutes, we went from 5 or 6 children to about 40 children playing games there. And as I was saying, they're not a culture that plays very much, not in the sense of playing with adults. So they're very, very not used to imaginative games. I know there was a language barrier, but even with translation, they really struggled. So it was trying to find the simplest games we possibly could to engage them. But playing games with them did mean, and we'll come to it a little bit later, we were able to have an opportunity to do a teaching afternoon with them. But yeah, we'll come back to the children. Here's some of the food we're eating each day. Rice and beans, chicken. There'd often be some sort of chicken broth. If we're lucky, then we get some vegetables, because interestingly, vegetables were harder to come by than chickens, especially with flooding and lack of and the destroyed crops. This was one of Mike's specials. Many of you may know the responses: God is good all the time, God is good. And Mike added a next bit where he says, and I think he learnt this from Uganda, I think he said, where the next line says, "That is his nature," and then everyone jumps up and says, "Wow." And that was a staple of many of our training sessions. And the bishop found it quite helpful when he saw people drifting off a little bit, maybe losing attention, because once people heard God is good, they'd start shuffling in their seats ready to jump for the wow. And we'll see a couple more of them, particularly in this diocese. They really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, we'll see some of that, more of that in a moment. What comes next? Some more games being, oh no, this is tea being had. Some sung worship. So the sound quality is not great, but very, very lively singing. All they had were drums. They'd often spontaneously break out in singing at the beginning of or the end of a session. Someone would just walk up towards the front and start singing the first line of a song, waiting, and then everyone else would join in. So yeah, lots and lots of lively singing all together. This was us playing some more games with the children, trying to involve them and teaching them to lead the games as well. This is outdoor teaching, and like I said, very illustrative. So this is one of the team members, Luke, throwing something at AJ, and he's trying to dodge it. It was a teaching point about failing to hit the mark and not being able to do the things that we would like to do. There were young and old folk around. This is William Tong, one of the younger ones. He's quite well educated. He'd like to be a doctor when if he is able to get enough education. He was one of our translators. But yeah, lots and lots of lively young and old Christians there. Many of them are first-generation Christians. We'll meet one towards the end of the pictures, someone who became a Christian elsewhere, and who came back and was influential in starting the church. These next 3 clips are very short. This is them enjoying the wow when they received their certificates at the end of the conference. I think this was one of the most senior men in the conference, and there was great jubilation that he was joining in with some of the wowing and jumping and dancing. So this was, you won't be able to see it very easily there, but all of us, Mothers Union dressed up, Sunday School dressed up, and clergy all dressed up, uniformed up, and at the end of the conference to say farewell together for the conference. Mothers Union, lady next to me with the green and the white, fourth from the right. The Mothers Union are very, very active in South Sudan. Lots of them remained and served and loved and cared for people throughout the war and dangerous times and famine, and we're told a consistent presence in speaking of Jesus and loving others throughout all the hard times. And so the Mothers Union are held in very, very high regard and were a real joy to have. They served in lots of different ways, and they were often at the very forefront of the singing and the dancing and celebratory worship. So yeah, that was really good to have them there. Let's see. More tea. I told you we broke for tea lots of times in the shade. You can see it was very hot. This was us on a spare afternoon before we moved on to the next diocese. We said, well, why don't we put on something for the children? So this is us with about 50 children. Luke's there telling the story of the prodigal son. There are children in the trees in the background. Some older children who weren't part of the Sunday school decided to listen up and join in. And so that was a really, really precious session of being able to engage with some of the children. And a lot of it was modeling for the church as well. There were times when we'd be having our sessions and children would be looking in at the windows and they'd be shooed away. And so we just kept reiterating again and again and again, no, children are welcomed into the life of the church. Jesus says, let the little children come to me. And yes, it might not be appropriate for them to be in the session, but let's not shoo them away at the least. Because I think often children are left to their own devices and summoned when there's a job to do and expected to clear out and to leave the adults to, sort stuff out and do things when they're not needed. This is another baby that I managed to carry at one point. This is us doing some drawing on the ground because no paper, no whiteboards, no anything, just very, very basic bits and bobs, finding trees and sticks and old leftover water bottles for our illustrations. This is the bishop's wife doing some crocheting. Lots of women are getting into crochet over there, so that was quite fun to see. And that's another one we'll have a look at later as well, crocheting. This is us just wandering around the days and receiving a gift from the Mothers Union, a little necklace thing for each of us. And then one of the really sad moments was on the Saturday, I think it was. We had a bit of spare time before Sunday worship and then traveling to the next diocese. We were able to go to a nearby bridge. This is them building, making bricks on the side of the river. And the river has massively has flooded over, whatever the word is, flooded over. And it displaced many, 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 many hundreds of people whose houses fell down, and the land was just flooded. They could not live on it. So there's a stretch of, I'm not quite sure how long it was. I reckon we walked maybe about half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile, and there are people camped out on the side of the road all the way down there who have been displaced, and all they've got are the clothes on their back, some sticks, and maybe some material to put a roof over them, and one or two folk had rescued their chickens, and there's flooded water on either side. And so we went to visit. There were some Christians in that place, because there's a church not far from there, and their housing and their church were all inaccessible. They fished by the river, and that was about all they had. So there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of fish being laid out to dry with all the associated pleasant and unpleasant smells and flies everywhere. But one of the words that one of our teammates members used was dignity, and how they carried themselves with great dignity, even in a time when things were really, really hard and difficult for them. But it was hard seeing how little they had, seeing them have to move. And it seems to be every couple of years that happens. It floods and they have to move. But yeah, they carry themselves with dignity, with some semblance of joy, particularly for Christians. We thought there was a sense of trust in the Lord, and they came and joined in with worship at the cathedral on Sunday because they couldn't make it back to their own church. It was really wonderful to meet some of them and to encourage them and to pray with them and for them. We took a trip to the market as well. Some young boys polishing people's shoes for a few pennies here and there, which was lovely to have. Some income, I guess, for them, but it just shows you that they have very little opportunities. They wander around and clean shoes to make a few pounds here and there. I guess we were supporting local business. This was us going back to the local politicians to say thank you for looking after us. They value safety highly, so we said we felt safe, and that was a real joy to them. And that brings us towards the end of our first diocese. Some children are learning some singing and dancing. This was our hotel, the Nyamlel Central Hotel. It was very, very basic. There was a hole in the ground for the toilet. There were buckets of water for washing, and the shower rooms were a concrete space and more animal droppings of some sort or another around the edges than you could count, and you poured cold water over yourself and called it a day. So yeah, very, very, very limited. And this was a nice hotel. This was this was nice. It was hard. It took a little bit of getting used to. I've got a little video actually showing you.
So this is the hotel we've been staying in Nyamlel. We drive inside compound, and that's our driver with the car. This is our showering and washing and cleansing area. You can see the toilets there. Excellent. The showers are no better. You go in with a bucket, and there's no hole in the ground. There's just one in the corner. These are our rooms. There's lots of bikes and people, different guests. And then we'll wander into my room. This is Luke's room. This is my room. AJ's room, Mike's room, and then the bishop's room is over there. This is my room. I did manage to lock myself out one day. I left my key inside when the padlock was locked, and we had to fit it out through this window. You can see this is the room. It's not bad. I kept the mosquito net on it all day, so that it'd keep the mosquitoes out. And these are all the empty water bottles that we've been drinking. Well, not all, some of them that I've been drinking this week. And that is your guided tour of the Nyamlel Hotel.
So we've taken a little bit of time at the first diocese. We'll speed up from here, but that gives you a bit of a sense of South Sudan and things that we were doing. A lot of it was just, workshops, ministry sessions, Bible studies, and a lot of informal conversations with folk. I think Nyamlel, the first diocese, we really felt welcomed and loved. The next diocese, which we are getting towards, this was a Sunday worship, and some of the Sunday school girls dancing, and boys dancing as a presentation. In a wheel town, our second diocese, it was a much, much shorter time. We got there on a late Sunday night in this car, which was having some troubles. And we left on the Wednesday afternoon, and we were teaching from Monday morning all the way through to Wednesday just after lunch, and then we left straight away. So it felt a little bit different, They've got a lot more money in the town, not least because they've got a connection with an American church, with a plaque in their newly built guest house, with electricity, and we could have a shower cold, but you turn the tap on and there was an electric pump outside that pumped water to a water butt on top of the building, and we had running water. So it was quite luxurious, really, but it was harder there because our time was so short, and we didn't really get a chance to get to know people very well, but it was much the same in terms of ministry. There was singing. Mike is very lively and joins in with dancing a lot, as did AJ, and I would clap and shuffle my feet. I would try to join in a little bit, actually, sometimes, but it's not really my style. This is another workshop which I was leading in the back of the church. We were just hiding for shade. We'd just find anywhere where we could find shade, and we'd have to shift as the hours moved on, as the shadows moved with us. This is a local school as part of the diocese that we're able to visit and say hello to folk, and having tea and doing teaching and illustrations, and on 1 or 2 days we had some bananas. Mike's holding a banana there, which was a real treat. Lots and lots of water pumps. That's where largely they got their water, if they were able to afford the small fees that they would all contribute towards maintenance and upkeep. And cooking was outdoors in the sun. I didn't get it. They would be cooking all through the day without any shade. Some cooking went on in the building on the right, but it was very, very hot, and they would cook out in the baking sun, which made me feel quite bad, actually. But yeah, it was really hard. Some of those little things of, particularly for those who serve, like these girls here, they kept going and going all day. And there's a real sense of hierarchy in the country, where the older ones tell the younger ones what to do, and the younger ones do it. Men particularly can tell women what to do, and women do it. I don't think it's all bad necessarily. I think some of it is probably unhealthy. Some of it is just cultural. But yeah, I think it was hard for us Westerners with a very different cultural background, coming in and being told to stay seated and not to help with the tidying up, not to help with the carrying of things, and no one else modeled saying thanks even. So we tried to kind of go against that as much as we felt able to in offering to help and doing little things here and there, and being very explicit and profuse with our thanks at the end of each meal or each day, and taking opportunities to engage them, particularly these younger girls, each day. So yeah, it was good to have those opportunities, but it did feel hard at times. Journeys were difficult, long straight stretches of road, but at least we weren't 30 people bundled in the back of a van. So, it could have been worse, I think. That was a very common sight, to see people hanging off the edges of vehicles and just trying to hitch a lift or something, I guess. Some of our journeys took us through very flooded areas, and some of the roads had been damaged and partially repaired, but not yet fully, and we had to turn our car into a boat at times.
Not really that big.
I wouldn't want to drive there. The driver was very confident, but I'm not sure we always were. And that car looks like it's half submerged. So we did manage.
Yes.
But it just speaks to some of the infrastructure and the government. There's a lot of frustration amongst the populace about the lack of investments from the government in local needs and roads and infrastructure and education and healthcare and all those things. But yeah, it's very lacking, as you can see. Our final diocese was in Wanjok, where we had probably, our longest time. On the left is Canon Matthew, a very, very, very well-respected man in the diocese. He became a Christian in Khartoum back in the 60s, and then came back here, and under this tree started the church. Just a few folk, and now we gathered 135 or so people for a conference. So wonderful to see how the church has grown over the last 40 years or so in this place. Our final conference largely took place under this huge tree. Again, singing and worship and teaching. Mike is at the bishop's desk. This is the bishop's office. It's just a concrete room and that table, and that's it. The bishop is a voluntary role, as all clergy are. They're not paid. We'll see the bishop's house later, a picture or two. He gave up quite a well-paid non-government charity job, NGO, when he took on the role as a bishop. And so he gave up quite a lot of money in income. And his lifestyle had to change somewhat, and his family's, because none of the clergy are paid, and they give up a lot of their time. And that's just something of the lack of resources that the churches have. This is AJ having a conversation with one of the ladies about Bible studies and helping her think through how to do Bible studies and to teach, and more hanging under the shade and talking, singing and worship. And this is where the ladies were prepping food and serving people. And then one night in Wanjok Diocese, they were setting up these posts in order to show later that night the Jesus film. Does anyone know the Jesus film? Raise your hand if you do. Yeah, there's a few folk who do, yeah. It's an old movie about the life of Jesus, basically. And they had 400, 500, 600, 700 maybe people. They don't have the opportunity to go to the cinemas and watch movies. And so they had hundreds of folk come over 2 nights, several hundred each night, and they'd watch the Jesus film translated into their local language. They showed it once last year, and that Sunday, nearly 40 people came to be baptized because they preach after the video. So that was pretty cool. And quite a fun thing, so we nipped over and saw some of that. There were constantly kids watching us and listening in during the teaching. And these are the groups in their small groups practicing doing Bible studies, and again, lots of singing and dancing. And that would go on for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. And we would just join in and sing and praise the Lord. Even though sometimes they did sing in English, largely it was in Dinka, and we'd pick out a few words here and there. We learnt phrases like praise the Lord and things like that. But yeah, largely just joining in with the moment of worship. This is the big tree we were teaching under. This is a car from the diocese donated by Tear Fund. And there were multiple vehicles that we saw that were donated by Tear Fund. This is one of the church buildings without walls yet. They're hoping that in a few years' time they'll have the money to put walls up. But it does have a roof, and they gather there for worship week by week. Yeah, we're getting towards the end of the pictures and things to say. A donkey pulling a cart, just to highlight some of the technological lack and infrastructure lack that they have in the country. On one of the spare days at the very end of the conference, we went with the bishop, again, flooded roads, to his hometown. In the picture, you probably won't be able to see it, but he's just written the letters A, B, C, D, E. When the bishop was a child, this was a very spot that he learnt his ABCs. He was at school here, and they had no blackboards or anything, so they would follow the teacher's instructions and draw on the floor, and the teacher would come by and check their spellings by giving them a tick in the sand on the floor. When we visited the bishop's local home, childhood home, we were by a bridge, and people came to see the foreigners, and Mike decided to preach and teach them about Jesus using the imagery of the bridge and water, and so we had an impromptu little sermon there. This is us relaxing and sharing some time with the senior clergy, eating food. This was the orange cup was a big cup of some sargum, I think it's called. It's like a porridge. It was very sour. AJ was very, very brave and ate it all. Mike tried a few bites. I managed to eat half of it and struggled with the rest. So we had some interesting food. Not all of it was very tasty to us. On one of the mornings, we taught at the Bible school, a little theological training space that they've got for young leaders, potentially pastors in the future, that we taught at. These were some of the girls who served us, and we were able to spend a bit of time with them on the last day, and even went to the market with one of them. So that was quite enlightening, but very, very, very limited resources that live there. Lots of people working on the floors and selling stuff off mats. But lots of crocheting. I said we'd come back to this. The trip last year, one of the ladies who came from the UK, one of the team members from the UK was a lady who was chatting with the Mothers Union and sent them some crochet hooks after she got back home. And this is them showing off their creations, sending a picture back. And we're returning the favor by giving them some knives and just spending some time relaxing with some of the mothers, most of whom were working the whole time we were there. This is them cooking inside their kitchen, inside that little hut, and a lot of it outside. This little girl is an orphan. Infant mortality is very high. This little baby girl's mom died in childbirth. It was her firstborn, and the father just left. So the grandmother has taken up the slack, and with some help from the church and from the Mothers Union. Local school that we went to do some teaching at, and Luca's family, who's our team member. He traveled with us across all 3 dioceses and was partly helping us with translation, but also doing some teaching of his own. Luca is the Diocesan Rooted in Jesus coordinator. So we do some teaching, we put these books in people's hands, and the bishop appoints a coordinator who will go on with the work after we're gone, liaising with group leaders, encouraging them, answering questions, and helping them. And so it was great to have Luke with us, and he was a real asset to us, especially being able to speak the local language and answer people's questions directly. And then we began our onward journey home. Back through the water. This time we saw a car that was stuck. I thought I pulled up the video, but I didn't. It was completely stuck in the water. The engine was smoking, and it was not going anywhere anytime soon. So we were just really thankful that wasn't us. And praise the Lord, He kept us safe through the whole journey. And we largely got to where we needed to when we needed to. Yeah, so on the last day we had a feast at the bishop's house. As you say, he's got quite a nice house, half finished, because halfway through building the house, he gave up his well-paid job to become a bishop. And but it was nice to be able to have a feast in his home with lots of senior clergy and lay members as well, and to enjoy that time together on our final night there. I took a photo of these boarding passes for our internal flights. Many of you will have known that you would have prayed for us. We bought the tickets, or someone bought the tickets for us from Juba, a return flight. But apparently, we were supposed to, upon landing, go to the local ticket office, plane office, airline office, and tell them that we'd bought the tickets, so that they wouldn't sell the ticket space again, because apparently they don't have systems in place to communicate across offices. So we turned up on that morning not knowing whether we would get on the plane, and Luca and one of the canons of the cathedral had spent an hour and a half talking to the staff, trying to get us seats, and they got nowhere. And so the bishop went with us and had a substantial conversation, and then we were told to wait, and we waited with a lot of uncertainty until someone rocked up and asked for our passports and gave us the boarding passes, and we breathed a massive sigh of relief. We were concocting plans to drive 6 hours south to another town and to buy tickets and things, but praise the Lord that we managed to get on one of those flights on the airstrip and make our way back home. But even that was slightly tricky. When we landed in Juba, we had no idea who was collecting us. We had no idea what we were doing. But someone on the plane was the head of the Mothers Union for that whole province, that lady on the left, facing the other way, Harriet, and she was like an angel from the Lord. She made some phone calls to different bishops and folk in Juba and said, someone needs to come and collect these men. I'm not moving from here until I know they're safe. And she stayed with us for about 15, 20 minutes until a bishop appeared and rescued us and brought us to where we needed to go. So again, the Lord provided at various points just the way we needed. It was raining on the last day, the first sign of rain we'd seen all during our whole time there, and then a final meal before we got on our final flights back home towards the UK. And we had a 5-hour layover, lots of walking and looking at the same shops 3, 4, 5 times because there were only a few shops. And we made it back to the UK and to our families. So that's us. That's kind of the trip. I hope that gives you a bit of a flavor of things. It went really well. We're really, really thankful for all of you who have prayed for us and shared with us in that. And Rooted in Jesus, as I say, I learned a lot about the organization, about the work that they do during my time there. It was a bit of an unknown when I went out because I knew very little. But it's wonderful, as I said earlier. There are lots of organizations at work in a place like South Sudan. I'm really thrilled about Rooted in Jesus because, in a sense, we didn't bring anything to them. We didn't bring them much money. Really, we didn't build any infrastructure. We didn't contribute anything to change their lives on a day-by-day basis. But we were able to bring them, in a sense, what they already had. We were able to encourage them and say, look, your pastors have Bibles. Some of you have Bibles. Let's open it up and learn together. And let's learn about Jesus. Let's fix our eyes on him. Let's learn to be Christian disciples. And here are some books, Bible studies that will help you with that. These are some skills that will help you to recruit people into your home groups or Bible studies or whatever you want to call them. These are some techniques to help you in those groups, to teach and to help others to learn and to grow together as you open the scriptures. And we didn't bring them anything, and yet we brought them exactly what they needed in a very spiritual sense that I think lots of other organizations aren't able to do, and certainly non-Christian organizations don't. I found it really encouraging and a real blessing. And some of the highlights, I think, are just the unity of worshiping with other Christians. That they really are the same as us. We worship the same Father, the same Son. We're filled with the same Holy Spirit. Many of the songs that they sang were songs that we all would know because they learnt English Christian songs from the missionaries from 40 years ago who are singing songs that we sang in our churches here. And so even that was another added sense of, we are worshiping the same Lord, even with often the same songs. That was a real joy. And then the only other thing to add, I think, is, and following on from that, is I've been thinking a lot about Proverbs 30. I should have got a Bible. But anyway, Proverbs 30, verse 7 to 9, has some words to say about wealth and poverty. If you're at the prayer meeting, I would have said some of this earlier this week. But Proverbs, chapter 30, says this: 2 things I ask of you, O Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. And I think I found that I had to remind myself of verses like this, that what they lacked there in financial terms and in terms of food and opportunities for education and all those things, what they needed was not Western money and Western education and a Western infrastructure and all these things, because maybe we have too much and we disown the Lord and we say, who is the Lord? But it's not good for them to be poor either. It's not good for them to feel the need to be so poor that they have that sense of wanting to steal and so dishonoring the name of our God. And so, yeah, that just really reiterated to me again that sense of course it's good to give them money, to build infrastructure, to be able to share different things with them. But most of all, they really do need the Lord Jesus. And so, yeah, coming home, there was a sense of joy and gladness of shared worship. There's a sense of, yes, we haven't got it wrong, really. Jesus really is enough, whether you're rich or you are poor. And yeah, so being encouraged to keep going with that and being thankful for an organization like Rooted in Jesus who goes out with that express purpose to build people up in the faith, to grow Christian disciples, and to build the church. So yeah, that's me. I've been going on for quite a while now. Thanks for listening. I hope that's given you a bit of a flavor of the trip and what Rooted in Jesus does. If you've got any questions, then speak to me. If you want to find out more, then Rooted in Jesus has a website where you can kind of look at some of their resources and some of the other things that they do. They send about 10 trips a year and have done for 20-something years, I think. Yeah, it'd be good for those who are interested to get their newsletters, to pray for them, to support them. As a church here at All Saints, some of the tithe fund here goes towards Rooted in Jesus. So please do keep them in your prayers as well. And yeah, I think that's me. I think I've said enough. Unless anyone wants to ask anything. Yeah? Great. Yeah, you're all ready for me to be quiet now, aren't you? Good. There's still more food. If you want to help yourself to something on your way out, don't feel like you've got to dash off. But yeah, thanks all for listening. Thanks to those who are on the live stream. You've not got any visual of me, but hopefully you've been hearing our voice, my voice. Yeah, thanks very much, and see you soon.